There are so many things about Rafa Nadal that we'll never see again. We'll never get to enjoy again in real time. And that's the sad reality. I know I'm not cheering anybody up right now, anybody who's sad about the news and reminiscing on all the great times that they've had with Nadal being a part of this sport. But that's what greatness is. You know, it's a special factor. It's irreplaceable. And there are a lot of aspects to Nadal that I put in this category of, you know, completely one of a kind and something that I'm always going to miss enjoying and watching. And, you know, I'll start with what I would describe as a perfectly calibrated competitive nature. He was an extremely, and I'm going to do all of this in past tense, even though there's a little bit more Nadal left to go. You know, Davis Cup and the 6 Slams exhibition, I think, are the 2 times that we'll see Nadal on a tennis court, at least as a competitive professional. The competitive nature, it is so difficult to have that level of fire and determination and, you know, none of the negativity that goes along with it. So he was incredibly positive on the court, yet played with a ton of emotion. And normally you associate emotion with roller coaster, you know, a lot of ups, a lot of downs, and you kind of ride these waves and these peaks and valleys. Nadal had something so rare as to play with a ton of emotion, but to basically keep it, not that he'd never get upset when he expected more out of himself, but to really keep his energy, which was an immense amount of energy, a ton of energy, keep it going in the right direction in a way that was going to help him win matches. And that, of course, materialized in a level of effort on a point in and point out basis that was outstanding. Something that everybody who plays the sport strives to achieve. There's the whippiness of that lefty forehand, sort of a redefinition of how we think about topspin, what we think the limits of topspin can be. And I think as we continue in the era of violent racket speed, lighter rackets, polyester strings, you know, we're going to see more and more of the heavy RPM, but Nadal he's like the godfather of heavy RPM. Not that he was the first. I know any tennis historian would you know, be upset at any indication that Nadal was somehow, you know, the first to utilize heavy topspin, but he certainly pushed it to brand new limits. And the way he used margin and height really, really broke new ground. And the aesthetic of that lefty forehand and the weapon that it was, you know, no one has been able to emulate that since. And I'm sure if it was at all possible to emulate, there are tons of players out there who would have loved to been able to do it. But it was a very, very special shot. There's the athleticism. And he started obviously as a teenager, he was smaller, and there was immediately that jitterbug quickness. But with that jitterbug quickness that was maintained, eventually also became this bruising strength. An athlete who is simultaneously strong as an ox and also quick as a cat. And, you know, one of the most imposing and intimidating physical players of all time. I don't think you can talk about the physicality and the athleticism without also discussing the longevity against all the odds, because he proved everyone wrong. Everyone. I don't know. He may have even proven himself wrong. I'm not sure. But I think he probably did. But with the physicality that I just described and the effort level that I described earlier, there was obviously a widespread assumption that Nadal's time was going to be somehow limited by his style of play, or even just by the clear trend that was sustained throughout his career of a guy who got injured a lot. He missed a lot of slams. I had that number written down somewhere. I don't memorize it, though. He's missed a lot of slams in his career, and he rarely went from January to November without sustaining an injury and missing tournaments at some point along the way. And I think one of the what should be said about that is one of the hardest things about being a pro tennis player. As much as us on the sidelines envy the life of someone who gets to hit a ball around and make millions of dollars, you have the travel, but there's probably nothing that sucks more than getting hurt. There's probably nothing harder in this game than having to rehab and come back from injuries. And that's something that even non-tennis players can relate to. Anyone who's had a serious surgery or a serious injury knows that rehab sucks. It's no fun at all. And Nadal had to pick himself up off the mat so many times. Really, an almost incomprehensible number of times he was willing to go into the trenches and to recover from injury after injury after injury. And I don't think it was ever easy for him, but he was always willing to put in those hard yards. And somehow it didn't deter him, because for most, I think it would fry most players. It would break the will. It would make it very hard for a player to continue to improve as a player. And Nadal was able to achieve an incredible amount of longevity against the odds and maintain an elite level of play despite a lot of setbacks with the body. I also want to say that for all the things that Rafa is known for, whether it be the physicality, the forehand, he honored every part of the game from a technical standpoint, to the point where the things that he's not known for are largely underrated, whether it be his backhand, amazing backhand. But what about his hands? His hands were amazing. Once Roger Federer retired, John McEnroe would always say that he believes that Nadal is the best volleyer on the tour. And I think he had a good argument there. I think it very well could have been true. I would not argue with it. Save for maybe some technical arguments about how selective Nadal would be about when to come forward, therefore not putting himself in a position on a very regular basis in which he had to hit difficult volleys. But when it came to just executing on the volleys, I don't know who I would trust more than Nadal, especially in the latter stages of his career, because he had the softest hands you could have. A master of the drop volley, an incredibly reliable forehand drop shot to go along with sort of the threat of the power that he possessed in that forehand. But it's a larger point about the fact that Nadal, is a player who has very definable strengths. And I guess I would add, forehand, physicality, mentality. Those are probably the three pillars of what people think about when it comes to Nadal as a player. There's just a lot of other stuff. There's a well-roundedness there. Serve never really became a weapon, but there's a well-roundedness there in all aspects of his game. It's really impressive. Not to mention, I think tactically, his feel, his awareness, his shot selection, off the charts. And I want to end with something less specific to the court, at least end this part of it, with his human side, which is not something that I tend to harp on because, I consider myself an outsider when it comes to these sorts of things. I'm not in the locker room. I don't pretend to know these people. I try not to make a ton of moral judgments about these people, good or bad, unless they give me, an obvious window into certain things. And, on-court behavior is on-court behavior. You can call it for what it is. I don't think it always represents how these people are off the court. I will share one thing that I know about Nadal. I know it's something that he does, and it's something that I admire very much. When Rafa is eliminated from a tournament, I've also seen this. I've seen footage of it. When Rafa is eliminated from a tournament, he goes into the tournament offices and he finds the referees. He finds the organizers, the people who do the practice schedules, the people who mediate the media relations, anybody who's in the offices. And what he likes to do before he leaves the tournament is he shakes everybody's hands and he says thank you. He shakes as many hands as possible and he says thank you. And that's what he does before he leaves. And I think that speaks volumes as someone who knows the impact that simple gesture of kindness can leave, knows that none of it is possible without these people. It shows a lack of ego, frankly, to be able to thank the people who make it happen. And it's easy to do that after winning, but the fact that Rafa would so often do that after losing, that he would, despite feeling however he felt at the time, he would go out of his way to just say thank you before leaving the particular stops on the tour. Something that I wanted to share because it's something that stuck in my mind.